Hello everybody. So the topic of today's webinar is to create a working plan in Farm Focus. So the aim of the session today is for us to feel confident to create a working plan in Farm Focus. So why do we plan? Well, there are a number of reasons and you can just see them there. But as you know, farming is not for the faint-hearted. Last season was especially tricky with high inflation, adverse weather events, high interest rates, and a reduction in farm gate prices. But Farm Focus is a tool that can help the stress of the unknowns. Having control of your finances by having a plan is so much better than having your head in the sand. This time or this year is going to be particularly tough. So it's really important that you have a budget that you understand and that resonates with you. If you do a budget and it looks bad, you're still ahead of the game. You've got choices. You're in control. You're in the driver's seat. You can choose to tighten your belt. Maybe go to your bank manager and ask to stop paying principal or extend your overdraft. But having a plan in place provides clarity and reduces stress. So now what I want to do is I want to move to the demonstration data. Today I'm going to be using the dairy demo data. All right, let's pop into a working plan that's already been pre-populated. The working plan is your main budget. It's a living plan. Your opening and closing balances will change as actuals sit on top of your budget. There are three parts to the working plan. There's the cash flow, which is all about the dollars. You've got your livestock rec, which is all about stock quantity. And you've got your dairy forecaster, which is all about milk production. In this webinar, we're going to focus mainly on cash flow due to time constraints. So let's look at how we navigate around our cash flow. The first thing to note is the actual sit on the left-hand side and your planned items on the right-hand side. Here is your revision line. As the months end, the actual sit on top of the planned items. Now we can move this revision line back so we can see our budgeted items, and we do that by going across to here, dropping down on the dropping down arrow, and then clicking into May. And now you'll see we've all just got the planned items. Now the working plan is a continuum. 1 year flows into the next. So for example, our opening balance here is actually the closing balance from last financial year. You will also note that this plan is GST exclusive. You enter your amounts as GST exclusive, and the GST is picked up here and calculated for you by Farm Focus on its own line at the bottom here. We've got this padlock up here, and this is where you save a baseline plan. So when you've created your plan, you can click on this padlock and save a read-only copy of your budget. This token over here shows us that we are in cash view, which means we are viewing our plan based on payment date. We can click into here and move it across to accrual view if we like. And now our plan will be displayed based on invoice date. This is good to know, but generally we always develop our plan in the cash basis. Up here we've got our settings cog. In settings here we can add a planned name, but note the working plan is always called the working plan. We recommend you add a description, as the description always stays with the plan. You can filter your plan by bank account, but probably more usefully by tags. So if you use management tags, you can filter for management tag A, which might be Farm A, and build your plan for that farm first. Then filter for tag B, which is maybe Farm B, and build a separate plan for that second farm. Then you can consolidate your plans by clearing the filter and have an overarching plan for both of your farms. You can also print your reports. You can print the report, download the PDF, or export to Excel should you wish. Now let's have a look at the structure of the cash flow grid. These chevrons here allow you to extend or collapse your budget. So here we've got the section level, category level, and extended code level. Now your section level for all budgets should look like this. This is what we believe best practice looks like, and this is where your code structure is very important. If yours does not look like this, then we suggest you review it. You can use the demo data as a guide for best practice or call our help centre. And to get the demo data, everyone can access that. You go up here that's the name of your farm, and you slide down. Here it says add farm. Yours will say add a demo. As I'm already in the demo, I don't get that option. So let's make a start. We need to build our plan for this year. Where do we start? Well, I follow 5 steps. My first step is I think about what my year ahead will look like. Is it going to be the same as last year? Am I going to be increasing or decreasing my stock numbers? Do I need to pay back any principal? Do I have any big R&M ticket items that I need to include in my plan this year? Once I've got my strategic plan sorted, I move on to step 2, which is what will I use as the base of my plan? Now, there are many options, but the power of Farm Focus is the data is already there to write a great plan. My third step is I start with income first. I like to be realistic, but conservative with my income. My fourth step is I then work through all my expenses, and finally, I validate my plan, step 5. So let's pretend that we've completed step 1 and we've had a think about the high-level strategy for our farm. We can quickly move into step 2. What will I use as the base of my plan? So to do that, I just want to move us into the landing pages for our plan. And in Farm Focus, you'll see that we have 3 types of plan. We've got our working plan, which is our living plan, which we're talking about today. We've got our baseline plans, which is basically a snapshot of our working plan at any point in time, and we can have as many baseline plans as we like. And we also have our draft plans. These are our scenario plans, our what ifs. What if I was to buy the neighbour's block? If you're looking at those sort of scenarios, create a draft plan for it. Back to step 2. What am I going to use as the base of my plan? Well, you go into your landing page here and then you press into new. Now, I've already developed a working plan for this financial year. So for the demo purposes of this demo, I'm going to be developing a plan for the 24-25 season. I click into my new here, and here are my options for creating my working plan. I can create an empty plan. I can use my actuals plus my plan to date. This is probably not a good option at the moment, as I only have 1 month into the current year, or I can choose my actuals. When with your actuals, you can select a year. Normally you'd use last year, but if last year is not a standard year for you, then you might like to choose another. Now, copying actuals as the basis of a plan is the simplest option, but it is not necessarily the best option. We find if you use last year's actuals, you can mindlessly adopt the numbers without giving it much thought or consideration, and therefore not really understanding your plan. The choice you use when developing a plan depends on the time of year and what gives you the most value. At the end of the day, there is no right or wrong answer, and often a combination is the best option, and this is what we want to show you today. So for now, we are going to create a plan based on our empty plan, and what we want to do is we want to show you how we can quickly work up your plan. So let's move to step 3, start with income first. Now for our sheep and beef farmers, income is all about the stock rec. And for dairy farmers, it's all about the stock rec, but more importantly, the dairy forecaster. Now, I'm not going to cover completing the stock rec in any detail this afternoon. This will be covered in another webinar, but at a high level, let's jump into our livestock grid. So we click into here, and now we're in our livestock grid. What you need to do is start with your opening numbers. These flow through from your closing numbers the previous year. Remember the aging process. You're a calf, and then on the last day of the financial year, all your calves become rising ones or 1-year-olds, just like lambs. You're a lamb, and then on the last day of the financial year, all the lambs age up to hoggets. This is an industry standard. All stock age up on the last day of the financial year. So if my end of financial year was the 31st of May, all my stock age up on the 31st of May. If your end of financial year is the 30th of June, all your stock age up on the 30th of June. So the first thing you ask yourself is, are your opening numbers correct? If they are not correct, you've got two options. Firstly, you could correct last year's stock rec, so your closing numbers from last year are correct, and therefore your opening numbers from this year will be correct. Or you could draw a line in the sand and change this year's opening numbers. Now, if you go back and correct last year's numbers, we find the biggest issue is people fail to enter their non-financial stock events, like their births, deaths, and missing. So your non-financial livestock events are events that no cash has exchanged hands. Now, if your numbers are way out and you want to draw a line in the sand, you can correct your opening numbers by just simply clicking here in the grid and making a change. So I'm going to say in my mixed age cows, I'm going to say I've only got, say, 300 cows, and then I save. Now you'll see my opening numbers have changed, and I've got this little warning just here. This is just a warning letting me know that my opening numbers differ from my closing numbers, but it's nothing more than a warning, so you don't need to worry about it. Now, another few tips. There should be no calves or lambs in your opening numbers, as they should be born within the year and have all aged up at the end of the financial year. There should also be no negative numbers in your opening numbers, and I would recommend that you adopt the KISS principle when creating your stock rec. Keep it simple, silly, or stupid. Too many stock codes can make a very complex stock rec and make the aging process difficult. So now we want to enter the detail into the grid. So what I like to do is I like to add the detail at stock class by stock class level. I can drop here into my drop down arrow, and this will display all the potential events for this stock class. Now what I like to do is I work through the stock class, adding all the necessary events for the 12-month period. So I'd put in all my sales, all my purchases, all my deaths, and once I'd done that, I would collapse it back up and move into my next stock category. Now I'd methodically work through my stock rec like that. Now the best practice is to use worksheets when entering information, especially for sales and purchases. And I'd like to demonstrate that with my bobby calves. So I'm going to go into the detail here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a non-financial stock event, a birth. I'm going to enter 100 calves, bobby calves are going to be born in July. Now it's a non-financial event, so I can just add the number directly into the grid. Now what I want to do is I want to sell 90 of these bobby calves in July. So now I'm going to go into my worksheet. To do that, I go here, plus add, I click into this, and now I'm in my worksheet. I've got my event date here. I can easily change that if I like. Now I'm in my plan. In this instance, I actually don't want to be specific on a date, I'm using the whole month. But if I wanted to add a specific date, I could, but I'm using the whole month. I've got my payment date here. Again, I'm using July. I could specify a date if I liked. Here are my events. I've got this drop down arrow here. This tells me that it's a sales event, but if I drop down here, here are all my options for events for this stock class. Over here, this tells me my stock class, and then I've got my account number, my tag. I can add a description. I'm going to say 4-day calves, and then I want to enter a quantity. Now I said I was going to be selling 90 bobby calves. There are 40 kgs a head, and here I get the option of carcass weight or live weight. In this instance, they're live weight, and then I'm going to put my price. It's going to be $15, and then I get a choice between per head or per kg. Wouldn't it be good if I was going to get that amount? This is a per head basis, and then Farm Focus automatically calculates the amount for me. I then have the option to add a note, and this is when I'd like to add any assumptions or any critical information that I want to refer back to later. In this instance, I'm just going to put that they're FCO calves. Save or add. And here, this gives me the summary of my worksheet. It's a planned event, so it's got a P here. If it was an actual event, it would have an A. Then I've got my event date, the type of event it was, my stock code, my description. Now note here, only my description is displayed here in the summary and not my note. So if I want anything critical to be appearing in the summary and also in my reports, I would add it to the description. I've got my account. If I was going to be using a tag, I'd have that here, my quantity, my unit price, and the total amount. Now, if I wanted to add another line here, I could just simply do that right there. So now you can see that I had 100 bobby calves born in July, and I sold 90 of them. Now, what we do need to remember is the dollar value from your stock rec flows through to your cash flow. So, for example, I'm going to move out of my livestock grid now and into my cash flow. And you can see now when I go into income, into dairy sales, I've got 1,350 here under bobby calves because my livestock grid talks to my cash flow. Now, as I said earlier, I've just given you a quick overview of the stock rec. There will be a webinar specifically on developing a stock rec, so please do look out for that. I now want to move to my dairy forecaster, but for this demonstration, I actually want to use a dairy forecaster that's been pre-populated, so I've moved into the 23-24 working plan. I'm going into my dairy forecaster. And the first thing you need to do when you're working up your dairy forecaster is to go into the settings cog and check the information here is correct. In this instance, it's telling me I'm a Fonterra farmer, but I could be Synlait, Westland or other. And then my farming type, I'm an owner-operator, but I could make it a share milker. And if I did that, I'd have to enter my percent of my milk check, so Farm Focus can automatically calculate my income based on that. So once I've checked my settings and it's okay, I look at adding in my milk solids I'm going to produce every month. So the milk solids I'm going to supply in June, but get paid in July. And I just simply write those numbers there, so I can just change that up if I like. Now, because I'm a Fonterra supplier, my payment schedule has been automatically pre-populated. Now, Farm Focus will update this milk price whenever Fonterra updates theirs. You just need to go up here and choose Update Fonterra Prices. But please remember, your retro payments, your dividends, and your levy payments need to be added manually into your cash flow. Right, now I want to move into step 4. I want to work through my expenses. So where do we start? I'm going into my farm expenses. I'm just going to go into my new plan for the one I'm developing, 24-25. I've gone into my expenses and you can see that I created an empty plan. But we're going to use a powerful tool called the comparison tool to put our actuals from last year on line 2. So to do that, I go up here and I press the comparison data. When I'm in here, I've got the option of using actuals or a plan on line 2. So if I use a plan, I could click that. I need to select the year and the particular plan. In this instance, I'm going to use my actuals from last year as the base of my working plan for this year. So I select actuals last year and then I apply. And what you'll see now is that my actuals from last year are displayed at the bottom and I've got blank line at the top. So I'm going to now work through filling in my working plan for this year. But we've got these wonderful time-saving tools that help you quickly build up your plan. I'm going to demonstrate those now by starting. So again, we recommend that you methodically work through building up your expenses category by category. So I'm going to start here with my wages. I'm going to use my drop-down arrow key and drop into my wages. Now you can see that last year I spent $78,000 on wages. This year, I've had to employ a new staff member, and I know my contract for that new staff member is $90,000. So I'm going to put $90,000 here, and I want to spread this $90,000 across the 12 months. So I then press spread. Now I spread over the 12 months, yes, and then I get the option to overwrite any existing items or add to an existing item. I'm going to use the option to overwrite because I haven't developed the plan yet, and then I'm going to apply. And now you can see that this 90,000 has spread evenly across the 12-month period. So I've finished wages. I'm going to click out of that, collapse it all up, and then methodically move down to the next category, which in this instance is animal health. Now for animal health, I expect my actuals from last year to be the same as this year. My stock policy is the same. Each month I'm going to follow the same ebbs and flows, so I want to adopt last year's actuals. Now I can do this at category level or extended code level. In this instance, I'm going to do it at category level. So I simply click into the first cell and I copy line 2. Here I get this tick box. I get the ability to consolidate items with the same attributes into one planned item. This means that if I had 10 animal health drench coded lines in 1 month, it would consolidate those into one planned event to keep my plan tidy. So I click that and I apply. And what you will see here is that I have now adopted my last year's actuals for my animal health, and it's picked up right through because I did it at extended code level, at category level. All my extended codes have picked up, and you can see my plan for this year is exactly the same as my actuals from last year. Now, what's really cool here is that in our next release, which will be in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to increase, when you copy line 2, you'll be able to increase or decrease by a certain percentage as well. So for example, if I wanted to increase my animal health by 5% from last year, I could copy line 2 and then plus 5%, and my animal health, all my animal health costs would go up by 5% from last year. So that's absolutely great news, and it's what you've been asking for, so it's good to be actually able to deliver that. So now I've completed my animal health line, I collapse that down, and I move into my breeding expenses. Now, with my herd test and record results, I want to just adopt the same as last year, so I'm just going to copy line 2. And once more, you'll see now that line, my this year's is the same as last year's. But with my reproduction expenses, I spent just over $11,000 on my reproduction expenses last year. This year, I'm going to spend $12,000. But my contract with my semen supplier has asked that I pay for my semen both in November and December. So now I just want to spread that 12,000 over 2 months. So I'm going to use the spread function. Now it's saying spread for 7 months because it's going to spread it for the rest of the financial year. But actually, I'm only wanting to spread for 2 months. So I choose 2 and apply. And now my $12,000 is split in November and December. I've now completed my breeding expenses. I collapse that back up, and then I would methodically work through all the other categories within my farm expenses. But what I want to do is actually demonstrate the copy function, and I'm going to do that in the rates, insurance and ACC category. So I'm clicking into that and I'm going to my rates. Now I can see my rates from last year was $6,300 a quarter. I know that my rates this year are going to be $7,000 a quarter. So I push 7,000 and then I opt this time for copy. And when I go for opt copy, I can copy every month, but in this instance, I want to copy every quarter. So I press every 3 months, and then I want to end at the end of the financial year, and I apply. And you can see now how the rates have been copied every quarter. So I just want to draw your attention to this, please. If I go into here and I've got nothing in the cell, I only get to the option to view, add, or copy line 2. As soon as I add a number into here, my options increase, and that's when I get the option to use the copy and spread function. Now I'd like to demonstrate the worksheet within the working plan. I'm going to do that under fertilizer. I'm clicking into fertilizer. I'm clicking into the empty cell, and this time I want to add a worksheet. Now this is very similar to what we saw in the stock rec. So I'm going to press add, and my worksheet has opened up. Now worksheets are a great way to add information to planned events. You can record assumptions, and we recommend that worksheets be used for big ticket items or when it's particularly important to capture quantity and unit price or any assumptions about a particular line. So we would recommend you use it for something like fertilizer. So again, payment date is September. I could make it a specific date if I liked. I've got my payment term here. This is if I've managed to negotiate a deferred payment, I can put that here. Here is my farm code. I can add a description, in this instance urea, my bank account number if I was using tags here, and now I want to enter a quantity. So I'm going to be purchasing 10 tonnes of urea, and I'm budgeting it to be $800 a tonne. Now Farm Focus will automatically calculate the amount. And now I get the option to write a note. And in this instance, I want to record that I'm going to spread with quad, because last year I actually used my carrier to spread the fertilizer, but this year times are tough and I'm going to be spreading it myself with the quad. And then I press add. And as you'll see, here is a summary of that worksheet. It's a planned item. It's in payment date September, invoice date September. Here is our farm code, the description again, to note that the note doesn't come through in this summary. And then we've got these 3 magical dots over here. Now, whenever you see these 3 magical dots in Farm Focus, it means there's more information behind here. So if I click on that, I do get the option to delete this planned item or edit this planned item. To edit it, I can also just click in here as well, and it takes me straight back into my worksheet. What I want to draw your attention to is the quantity here. Now, it's really important to be consistent with the unit of measure you use. It would really stuff up my reports if sometimes I use tonnes and other times I use kilograms in the same category. So I'm going to save that. And now I want to move to demonstrate the clear function. Now in my wages, I thought I'd had this person all signed up, but they have decided to take another job. So I want to clear this data out. I simply go into the cell and then I press clear. and this clears all the selected cells and all cells to the right. So I press apply, and now all that information is gone. And so what I've managed to do though is recruit somebody, and I've actually done really well. It's now only going to cost me $80,000, and I'm going to spread that over the 12 months and apply. And with that additional 10K that I've saved, I've decided that I'm going to employ a casual worker, and I'm going to pay them $5,000 just over calving. So I'm going to spread that just over 2 months, apply, and then I'm going to snap that up. Now we also have the view format, and to demonstrate that, I'd actually like to go into a pre-populated working plan. And we're going to look here at fertilizer, and now I want to view. And when I go into view, what it does, it gives me a summary of all the worksheets for the whole financial year. So I've got all the information here about my nitrogen that I'm going to put on throughout the financial year. Once again, the P here is it's planned. If it was an A, it would be an actual. So now I have completed all my farm expenses. I want to start looking at my other expenses. So the first thing I'm going to do is go down and look at my interest and rent. Now your overdraft interest is self-calculated. So you can see I've gone into overdraft here, and Farm Focus will self-calculate your overdraft for you, providing you have entered your overdraft interest rates in settings. Now I'm sure you'll all be aware of your loan interest. So once you've got all that all done, snap it closed, and you can move into your other expenses. First up, we've got our assets purchased or sold. Now this is where we think it's good for you to use a worksheet, so you can add the detail of these big ticket items that you're going to purchase. So I go into here and I want to view what I'm going to purchase, and look, in October I'm going to be purchasing or upgrading my motorbike, and in November I'm going to be purchasing a new trailer. So for capital expenditure, we would highly recommend you use a worksheet. Remember also too, once you've actually purchased these items, to add them to your asset register within Farm Focus, and you'll find that under settings, asset register. Now if we go back into snap that up, and then we move into our funds transfer and loan repayments. Now don't forget to add your hire purchases here. Then we've got our personal expenditure, our drawings, education and insurance, and then our taxation. Now often I leave this blank, and when I've completed my working plan, I flick it to my accountant who takes a look at it as part of the validation process. They will then let me know what I should budget for tax. Now, you might not want that additional expense of sending it to your accountant, so you can estimate your own tax if you like, but we believe the best practice is to send it to your accountant or talk to your accountant. Now, finally here, we've got our GST. Remember, we've talked about entering our amounts as GST exclusive, but Farm Focus calculates your GST for you down here on a line of its own. It calculates both the component and your GST refund or payment. So in this instance, I'm paying my GST every second month, and in doing so, my cash flow is my true cash flow. So now I've completed my working plan. I'm up to step 5. I want to validate it. Now a tip here in the validation process is what I personally like to do is I put my plan down for a few days and I come back to it with fresh eyes. It is amazing the number of mistakes I find. There is also no harm in printing your report. I like to do this as part of the validation process. I print my report, put a staple in the corner, put it on the coffee table, and then my husband and myself will look at it over a few days. And it's amazing, again, the number of mistakes we find and the number of tweaks we make during that phase. Now, when I'm developing my plan early in the year, I'm always like to be conservative. and I always delay as many discretionary expenses to the autumn as possible. So now I have developed my plan. I've had a look at it for a few days. I'm pretty happy with it. What I then like to do is to use some of our awesome reports to help me with the validation process. What I like to use is my variance report, and to do that, I go into reports, variance. And what I like to do is compare this year's budget, so my plan for this year, it's my working plan, and I compare it to my actuals from last financial year, and then I apply. And what you see here is your working plan, and in column B is your actuals from last year, and here are my differences. And what I do is I look for unders and overs, and if there's anything significantly different, I do some investigation. The other report I like to use to validate my plan is my trends report. So I go report, trends, and your trends report will give you the long-term high-level overview of how your cash has been earned and how it's been spent. Now you can do your trends up to 5 years, and I apply it. Now this is demo data. I actually only have 2 years worth of actuals, and here is my working plan for this financial year. You're likely to have 5 years of actuals. And what I do here is I look at the trends report and look at my plan for this year and think, does the new plan follow basically the same trends as my last 4 years? Once I've done that, I actually then like to run my plan past my trusted advisors, also my farm manager or share milker or shepherd. What I like to do is to get their buy-in, especially if they're going to play a key role in implementing my plan. And possibly this is even more important this financial year, as at least in our farming operation, we've had to tighten our belt a bit, and there are some items that perhaps we would have subbed out last year that this year we're going to potentially do ourselves. And for example, that's spreading our nitrogen with our quad rather than getting our carrier to do it. But also any fencing that occurs this year, we won't be contracting out to a fencer, we'll be doing it ourselves. So I want to get the buy-in from my farm manager about these changes. So now we've done that, this is really when the power comes from developing our report. We want you to use your budget or plan to give you more confidence, and you can review and look at your report in different ways. You could look at it at a section level or a category or extended code. I actually like to look at it at the section level. What I also like to do is run my eye along the closing balance along here. I like to look at my peaks and my troughs. So here we go. In August, I'm going to be running into negative overdraft by 17k. My November is my best year, you know, that I'm going to have 120k in my bank. But look, January, February and March, I'm going to be having, you know, my overdraft is going to be particularly high. Now, I know my overdraft for this farm is 50k, so I'm actually quite concerned about March. I'm sort of blown out my overdraft quite a lot. I might want to look at the phasing of items within this month. To do that, I go into my farm expenses, and if I look here, I've actually got 70k of maintenance fertilizer happening in March. What I possibly want to do is look at deferring that to April, because if you look at in April, I'm running at surplus here. So if I was to be able to pay that in April, or at least split that across the 2 months, that will get rid of my me exceeding my overdraft in March. I also could potentially look at deferring any unnecessary expenditure, looking at all the other things I could do in-house that I may have subbed out in other years. And look, too, consider, do I really need to spend that capital expenditure? I may also need to have a conversation with my bank manager. Can I put a temporary hold on my principal payments, or can I get an extension to my overdraft? But communication is key. If you can demonstrate your position and communicate it early, generally the results are going to be more positive. We all know that farming is a long-term game, is a long game, and that we're always going to have some dodgy years. You never know. When you complete your budget, it might be good news. You may be needing to talk to your bank manager about how you're going to make additional principal payments. Who knows about your personal circumstances? But once I've completed my budget, I then like to create a baseline copy of my working plan. And to do that, as I said earlier, I click on to this padlock here and I'm able to save a read-only copy of my working plan. Now you can update your plan at any time. It's simple to do. You into my wages, and I'm no longer going to be employing this casual staff worker because I want to decrease my costs. I can just go in and make the change then and there. The style of locking in a plan for the year and never changing it is outdated. Farming is complex, things change, and so your budget should be updated whenever it is needed for your personal circumstances. There is no hard or fast rules around when you should revise your budget, but whenever you do, please, I would suggest that you create a baseline plan of it and don't forget to add a description. Then you're able to compare your original working plan to your revised working plan to measure how much better or worse your year is compared to previous or original plan. Okay, that's about it from me. What I want to do now, though, is reflect back on our aim. So if you recall, our aim was to feel confident to create a working plan in Farm Focus. Reflecting on that aim, remember we developed our plan following a 5-step process. Our first step was to think about what next year might look like, and we developed that basic strategic plan that we incorporated into our plan as we developed it. Number 2, we thought about what we're going to use as the base of your plan. Now remember, we've got many options, but we recommended that you start with an empty plan, but use that comparison tool so your actuals from last year are on line 2, and then you work methodically through your plan. So that way you're not mindlessly adopting last year's actuals, you're giving it a lot more thought, you're understanding it, and therefore more likely to adhere to it. Once we'd got our base organised or agreed, we started with our income first. For sheep and beef, the income was all about completing the stock rec. For dairy farmers, it was about the stock rec and the dairy forecaster. Remember, we checked our opening numbers were correct first, and then we added all our sales and purchases, and we didn't forget to add, we always also add our non-financial stock events like our births and our deaths. And we work through our stock grid, stock category by stock category. Step 4, we looked at our expenses. Now remember, we had all those tools that made us able to build up our plan quickly and easily. We had the spread function, the copy line 2 function, the copy or clear function, and we used worksheets for those bigger ticket items or those items that we wanted to record our assumptions to look back at a later date. And finally, we validated our plan, and we did that by sharing it with our trusted advisor or using some of our reports within Farm Focus, such as your variance report, trend report, or your EFS. Now, finally, remember, if you need further support, we have a help centre within Farm Focus full of resources, along with a fantastic customer success team who are there at the end of the phone for you. We also have a chat box within Farm Focus, which is live, and our team are all Kiwis. They all use Farm Focus in their own businesses, so they will understand you 100%. Bye for now, and I'd like to wish you well for your season to come. Thanks so much.